Externalities, protection, and negative externalities. So, in this chapter, we'll talk about the economics of pollution, command and control regulation, market oriented environmental tools, the benefits and cost of U.S. environmental laws, international environmental issues, and the trade off between economic output and environmental protection. Across the country, countless people have protested, even risking arrest against the Keystone XL pipeline, which I think is on hold right now. Since the 1970s, the United States, using a variety of anti-pollution policies, has made genuine progress against a number of pollutants. Despite the gradual reduction in emissions from fossil fuels, many important environmental issues remain. Along with the still high levels of air and water pollution, other issues include hazardous waste disposal, destruction of wetlands and other wildlife habitats, and the impact on human health from pollution. The effect of a market exchange on a third party who is outside or external to the exchange is called an externality or spillover. Externalities can be either negative or positive. So, what is a negative externality? It's a situation where a third party outside the transaction suffers from a market transaction by others. What is a positive externality? A situation where a third party outside the transaction benefits from a market transaction by others. So that is two definitions for negative externality, positive externality. Pollution is a negative externality. So additional cost incurred by third parties outside the production process when a unit of output is produced. What is the social cost? It's the costs that include both the private cost incurred by firms and also additional costs incurred by third parties outside the production process. Here is an example of a demand curve which slopes downward, and then you see the supply curve for social and the supply curve for private. If the firm takes only its own cost of production in account, then its supply curve is S private, and then the market equilibrium is E0. So when we call for external costs, although they're not monetary costs, they still add to the social cost of $100 for every unit produced. The firm supply curve will now be S social. So you notice the supply curve has shifted to the left because of additional external cost. Market failure, when the market on its own does not allocate resources efficiently in a way that balances social costs and benefits. Externalities are one example of market failure. And to say that firms are getting better at um, pollution control, emittance, CO2s, but that's because of activism, because people have been out uh, uh, protesting and being active on those issues. If firms were required to pay social costs of pollution, they would create less pollution but produce less of the product and charge a higher price. So, what is command and control regulation? That's laws that specify allowable quantities of pollution and that also may detail which pollution control technologies one must use. It requires that firms increase their costs by installing anti-pollution equipment. Thus, firms are required to account for social costs of pollution in deciding how much output to produce. There are three difficulties with command and control environmental regulation. It offers no incentive to improve the quality of the environment beyond the standard set of the particular law. It's inflexible and it's subject to compromises depending on who's in office politically. So, a pollution charge is a tax imposed on the quantity of pollution that a firm emits. So, it gives a profit maximizing firm an incentive to determine the least expensive technologies for reducing pollution. Firms that can reduce pollution cheaply and easily will do so to minimize their pollution taxes. Again, if a pollution charge is set at $1,000, then the firm will have an incentive to reduce pollution by £30 because the $900 cost of these reductions would be less than the cost of paying the pollution charge. Marketable permit programs, a permit that allows a firm to emit a certain amount of pollution. Firms with more permits than pollution can sell the remaining permits to others. I think we've done that with carbon credit, where you can buy carbon credits, you can trade carbon credits. Better defined property rights. So, property rights, which are the legal rights of ownership on which others are not allowed to infringe without paying compensation. Property rights issues are highly relevant in cases involving endangered species and privately owned land. So, what are the benefits of a cleaner environment? People may stay healthier and live longer. Certain industries that rely on clean air and water, such as farming, fishing, and tourism, may benefit. Property values may be higher, and people may simply enjoy a cleaner environment in a way that does not need to involve a market transaction. Marginal benefits and marginal costs. Tools of marginal analysis can be used to illustrate the marginal cost and marginal benefit of reducing pollution. Reducing pollution is costly. Resources must be sacrificed. The marginal costs of reducing pollution are generally increasing, but the marginal benefit of pollution are generally declining. And this is a graphical presentation. I think I'm going to skip through this. What I want to just focus on is the definitions of the two terms, the activism around environmental policy to try and reduce emissions and gases in the process, which is, again, a negative externality on us as citizens in this society. And again, these graphs are in your PowerPoint slides. So, uh, international environmental issues. No nation acting alone can solve certain environmental problems which spill over national borders. No nation by itself can reduce emissions of carbon dioxide and other gases by enough to solve the problem of global warming. Biodiversity is the full spectrum of animal and plant genetic material. So we call this international externalities. And that's externalities that cross national borders and that a single nation acting alone can't resolve. And so our activism on these topics should not only be here locally, but countries around the world who um, uh, contribute negative externalities to our world and the economy by by pollution and greenhouse gases and CO2, etc. High income countries have historically been the primary contributors to greenhouse warming by burning fossil fuels, and we still are today. We did have the Paris Climate Agreement, which committed participating countries to significant limits on CO2 emissions. The practical details of an international system and how it would operate across international borders are complex. It seems unlikely that some form of world government will or can impose a detailed system of environmental command and control regulations around the world. As a result, a decentralized and market oriented approach may be the only practical way to address international issues such as global warming and biodiversity. Again, the trade off between economic output and the environment can be analyzed using the PPF that we talked about earlier in this course. Economists believe that an inefficient choice on the PPF is undesirable. Market-oriented environmental tools offer a mechanism for providing either the same environmental protection at a lower cost or providing a greater degree of environmental protection for the same cost. Again, this is the curve on the PPF. Each society will have to weigh its own values. Will decide whether it prefers a choice like P, with more economic output and less environmental protection, or T, with more environmental protection and less economic output. An inefficient choice, as we talked about the PPF, is M, which is undesirable. Again, that is negative externalities.